Welcome to the Dutch Podcast, where we dive deep into the science of hormones, wellness, and personalized healthcare. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Smeaton, Chief Medical Officer at Dutch. Join us every Tuesday as we bring you expert insights, cutting-edge research, and practical tips to help you take control of your health from the inside out. Whether you're a healthcare professional or simply looking to optimize your own well-being, we've got you covered. The contents of this podcast are for educational and informational purposes only. The information is not to be interpreted as or mistaken for medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
On today's episode, I get to talk with a guest who really has honed her experience working with women from a variety of different angles. Trained as a traditional chiropractor, but applying a lot of traditional Eastern therapies, she really has a powerful way to work with women to help them with hormone balance, with weight loss, with stress management, looking at it from a variety of angles. Now, I learned a lot in this episode, and there's things that we haven't covered before on the Dutch podcast, like what traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda say about how women can exercise, eat, and manage their lifestyle dependent upon the cycle phase that they're in. And, Dr. Westie, who I'll introduce in a second, she layers on that traditional knowledge with her experience and training in a modern conventional medical approach and really has a beautiful way of helping women by combining those things. I really think you're going to love this episode. I got so much out of this conversation. I know you're going to too. Let's go ahead and get started. Dr. Beth Westie is the author of the best-selling book, The Female Fat Solution, the creator of the 12-week Female Hormone Solution, the Eat for Your Cycle method, and the host of the Female Health Solution podcast. She's really made it her mission to change the way women view their health. She works to educate and empower women to take their health into their own hands and uses nutrition to help women work with their natural cycle within their bodies and achieve lasting weight loss results. So, Dr. Beth, welcome to the Dutch podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Yay! I am so excited to be here.
So I want to start. I love hearing from providers kind of how you got to where you are, because I know you're trained as a doctor of chiropractic medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to know what led you there. And then a lot of chiropractors practice in a more straight way. They don't really talk about nutrition or they don't talk about hormones. So I'd love to know kind of how your interest grew in this area.
Yeah. So I think like a lot of practitioners, the direction that you go, or if you get like into a specific niche, it's because of your own personal struggles. And I am no different. So I went to, I actually went to massage therapy school while I was finishing up my undergrad and absolutely loved working with my hands. So I was a pre-med student. So instead of going to medical school, I went to chiropractic school because it was just a next step extension of working with my hands. I loved the hands-on aspect of it, which is really funny because I don't do hands-on now. I do all virtual. But that led me to chiropractic school where I was just introduced to the world of like alternative health, natural health, all the things. I actually also got certified in acupuncture and Chinese medicine at the same time that I was going to chiropractic school. So the school I went to has a lot of different programs. So I took advantage of that. And it was fantastic learning about Eastern medicine at the same time. Now, since then, since I've graduated, I also studied and have certifications in functional medicine as well. But in school, it's graduate school, right? Everybody who's been through a grad program knows how flippin' tough it is.
Yes.
And I was no exception. And was working my butt off, all that stuff. But I also had my first 2 kids while I was a student.
Wow.
Yeah, I would not recommend 0 to 10 for that. And then I graduated, started a practice. So I graduated in, I think it was like April or May or whatever, took part 4, got licensed, purchased a practice in September the same year. And then October found out I was pregnant again. Yay. And my youngest, though, she was actually born 2 months early. So I had a brand new business. I was a brand new practitioner. I had a preemie, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and I was under a massive amount of stress.
Oh my, talk about it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how I survived, honestly, looking back at some of that time in my life. But I started getting ovarian cysts. Like every month I would have a cyst that burst. And when I was practicing, so I had a clinic, I was treating patients and I would go back into my x-ray room and hide behind a table and crouch on the floor and like just wait for it to pass, wait for the pain to pass. And then the next month it would happen again. The next month it would happen again.
And
And I
just a note of that,
struggled.
if anyone's never experienced that before, they're commonly mistaken for an appendicitis. Like this is talking about like
Yes.
extremely, extremely painful acute abdomen symptoms. This is like no joke.
Yes. Yeah. So when I talk about like the worst pain in my life, it was literally the worst. I'm like, I was an athlete, right? I played volleyball in college. Like, I'm no stranger to broken toes, broken fingers, playing, all this stuff. That nothing, I had 3 C-sections, right? Nothing compares to the pain, to the searing, stabbing, sudden pain of an ovarian cyst bursting. And then the fluid in your abdomen and everything else. It was awful. So the struggle that I had with it is that because this kept happening, this happened for a year and a half. And I kept trying so many things. I kept trying, I'm going to try a different supplement. I'm going to randomly throw something at myself, right? I was talking to all my friends. My husband at one point brought me to the ER because he was like, there's something wrong with you. Like, go in. Their recommendations were just birth control and Vicodin forever. And I was like, that's not helpful. So it really led me down the path of, okay, I really need to learn more about women's health and women's hormones, why this is happening for me. I didn't have this before. I was able to have, 3 kids. Why am I having issues and what can I do about it? So it's that whole pain point that I went through and the struggle that I had myself with, I'm not getting any answers. Nobody's giving me a direction. In all of that, no one did a hormone test on me. No one. No one.
That's
They just said, "Oh, your
fascinating.
hormones are off. You're having cysts, your hormones are off. Oh, you had babies. Oh, you're nursing. You're breastfeeding. Your hormones are off though."
It just goes to show how little knowledge and understanding there was at that time
Yes.
around women's hormone cycle. And I mean,
Yes.
it's really interesting because similarly, I had amenorrhea. Like my period never came as a kid. And that's what made
Yeah.
me, same story. I went to my OBGYN appointment and they said, well,
Yeah.
let's put you on birth control pills. And I said, well, what about when I want to have a baby? Because I want to have kids later on in life. And they're like, we have fertility drugs for that. And it was like, no one was interested in digging that layer deeper to try to understand why something that should be happening wasn't happening. And
Yeah.
that's what led me to want a different option. I think there's a whole community of healthcare providers out there like you and like me who experienced firsthand that lack of options.
Yes.
That
Lack
said,
of
there's got to
options.
be a better way. And now there's
Yeah.
an army of us out there, you know,
Yeah.
helping women and offering different options and pushing the research and really trying to get to the bottom and the root. And we've really made quite a lot of progress in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, and we have a long way to go. But
Yeah. Yeah. The lack of options and the lack of answers.
yeah,
That was
yeah,
the thing that I was so frustrated because I was like, I am a educated person, right? Like I have a lot of knowledge. I did research on my own. I have great health insurance. I can make any appointment I want. Like my husband is a brick mason, so he has, it's like union benefits, all this stuff, like really the best. Like going in, seeing specialists, all these things. No one could give me an answer. And I
mhm,
was like, why is this happening? And why can nobody tell me anything? Like, what am I doing wrong? I'm gluten free. I'm dairy free. I cut out sugars. I cut out alcohol, all this stuff. And the number of times that I was just like brushed off, or they were like,
mm.
"Pff." And again, still, no one did a single hormone test on me ever. Anything. No blood, no urine, nothing. Just, I'm still mad. I'm gonna start
I can
sweating
tell.
again. I'm
I
gonna
can
start
tell.
sweating again. So I need to calm down.
Let's not get that upset.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is really frustrating, and I think a lot of our listeners, providers, patients alike,
Mhm.
like, they can totally relate, so I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that story.
Yeah.
And now really you've dedicated your practice to helping women in the ways that they've not been able to find answers. So I wanna shift gears and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of your practice is focused on women's health and nutrition, including weight loss, which is such a challenging area for people and such a hot topic right now. Really seeing the
Yeah.
rise of metabolic disease and all the chronic health sequelae and effects on mortality and things like that. People are finally paying attention. And I know weight loss is like there's like the simple equation of diet and exercise, calories in, calories out. But I know that your kind of point of view and what you've added to the conversation is that women are a little bit different.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Oh, there's so much of this that comes from, again, my whole background in being an athlete for decades of my life. Um, and what we were told to eat, not eat, when to eat, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, the diet culture of everything, right? Fat is bad, don't eat fat, what that does to our bodies, being exposed to endocrine disruptors, all of that stuff has a huge impact on how our bodies function. And when we get stuck in it and say, okay, well, I'm eating healthy, I'm working out, why is this not helping? Right. And especially with something like PCOS, an insulin resistance issue, right? For me personally, too, I had extra weight that I was carrying that I was like, I don't understand why this isn't coming off. I was like, maybe it's because I'm still nursing. Maybe it's this or that. I don't know. I could be better, but I'm exhausted. What's the problem? It comes down to your hormonal function, your adrenal function, your cortisol response. Are you nutrient deficient? Are you methylating well? All these things matter. So many women are focusing on the details of, "Oh, I can't have creamer in my coffee, and I have to do 30 minutes of extra cardio on top of the workout I'm doing with my trainer. That's what's going to get me results." I mean, maybe when you're in your early or mid 20s, but when your hormones change and when your system changes, right? The meat suit that you live in changes. You have to shift and change your lifestyle to match that. So it's just very, very different overall. And we don't acknowledge that as much as I really think we should. Just the pure thing of like, hey, fuel your body differently, fuel your body for your hormones. You need different things nutritionally throughout the month, and leaning into that can make a huge difference
So
overall.
tell me a little bit about like what those needs are and how they change.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different things with this. And these are things, again, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. Like, these are, oh, I wish I knew then what I know now. Because for a long time, my life was sports. I was an athlete growing up. I was a three-sport athlete in high school. I got a scholarship to play volleyball in college. I got recruited by professional volleyball teams overseas in Europe and Australia. And I was really looking at that, making that my career. And there were some injuries and other things that sort of, led me astray. But I was like, I spent years and so much time training, trying to be better, trying to, understand, my body and just say, okay, I'm going to work out harder. I'm going to lift heavier. I'm going to, jump higher, all that other stuff. Whereas I didn't realize, like, hey, when you're in this phase of your cycle, when you're in the follicular phase, your body's going to be functioning different than the luteal phase. Like, oh, it's a different focus. You're going to need different nutrients, recovery, all that other stuff. So, follicular phase, estrogen, it burns carbs better. You're going to recover faster. Um, your system, does really, really well with, a good match of carb and protein, everything else. But in the luteal phase, after ovulation, all that totally changes. And anybody who's like gone for a run, right? Like you go to the gym, you work out, and you're like, this is great. I'm making great time. A week later, after you ovulate, you go to the gym, you do the same thing, and you're like, why does my body feel like cement? What the
Yeah, I
heck?
can totally relate to that.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's totally true, and this is
Yeah.
such an interesting concept. Now, are there published studies on, like, metabolism differences in those phases of the cycle, or is this primarily based upon your clinical experience?
Yeah. So Dr. Stacy Sims has research and stuff on some of these things as well. Yeah, so they are
Oh,
coming out with this, and they
yeah,
are, like, understanding, like, "Oh my god, I took a different body to the gym that day." There's even some professional female athletes, Ronda Rousey comes to mind. Her trainer would implement different training things for different parts of her cycle when
that's
she
cool.
was at her peak performance. And this is, and she was an Olympian and a professional, fighter, and these are some of the things that just like they're not huge changes, but they're tweaks enough to say your training can be different, your nutrition can be different. In the luteal phase, you need more nutrient, you need more fats, you need more proteins, more calories for per the day to let your system fully recover. And you need a little bit more recovery and to focus on that more to come back around again the next day and be your best self. Right.
What about rest too? Like, rest and recovery
Yeah.
differences?
Yeah, more rest and recovery in the luteal phase. Again, sometimes it's an extra, 30 seconds in between sets while you're working out. That's totally great. Sometimes it means, taking a full rest recovery day before you do something intense again, or
I was
realizing,
thinking I was thinking maybe, like, given permission to take a nap.
yes. Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure
Yeah.
take a nap. Oh, for sure take a nap. Yes. I'm a huge, oh my God, if we can talk about adrenal fatigue at some point, oh my God, naps are
Yeah.
necessary.
It is interesting
Um,
'cause you look at, like, competitive athletes, and
yeah.
I've thought about this before because, I lift and I exercise daily. I'm not, like, hardcore, but I do
Mm,
think it's the most important thing for, like, anti-aging and health,
yeah.
longevity, even probably more than nutrition, to be honest. I think it's, like, so, so impactful to have
Yeah.
consistent movement. Um, and I've also experienced that, like, different phases of your cycle feel different when you're working out, and I can lift more certain days than I can other days. And it's a little weird, but you have to just kind of get used to it. Or there are days where you just don't feel that motivation. I've definitely seen that tide, like that
Yeah.
premenstrual phase. I'm like, really have to drag myself to
Yeah.
just do the thing and be disciplined about it. But I think about competitive athletes sometimes, like let's take the Olympic Games. You wonder if there's a performance difference or a performance advantage for women who are at, like, maybe in the follicular phase during their competition compared to those that are on their menses. It's like such an interesting thing to think about. I mean,
Yeah.
menses is follicular phase, maybe that's not the best example, but in their luteal phase,
Yeah.
that there could
There,
be differences there.
yeah, there are, just with, kind of the athletic world, things like that. I know some Olympic athletes, like, I'm friends with them, things like that. They will take their biggest competition for the year and they will back up from there and try and manipulate their cycle so that
Interesting.
they are in that peak performance at that time. Or if they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't like performing or being like having a race when I'm on my period," they will try and manipulate their cycle, backdate it leading up
Mm,
to, just to make that change. Because there is a difference, right? There can be a difference with that. And that doesn't mean that, oh, I'm in this phase and I have a game or a performance or whatever, so I'm just not going to be as good that day. You can improve as long as you just change things up. I think just knowing that, like you said, oh, sometimes I'm just not motivated to go. Well, just knowing and having the knowledge of, oh, this is normal for me right now. That's okay. I'll still go. It's okay if I don't push myself because that's going to be more of a stressor on my body. But just understanding like there's nothing wrong with me and leaning into that,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, one example for myself is that, like, I normally do, like, a HIIT workout 2
Yeah.
days a week, Mondays and Tuesdays, and not like everyone really cares about my own workout schedule, but days that I don't feel like doing that, I'll do a longer walk instead. I
Yeah.
can do, like, cardio kind of as a list, the low intensity, steady state, longer walk.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you have to kind of ride with it. I mean, that's not just women in your cycle, it's all of us in order to stay consistent. It's like something's always better than nothing.
Yes.
Um, but so tell me a little bit about how you work with women to help them kind of adjust. Let's start with maybe nutrition through the cycle. What are the main
Yeah.
recommendations that you make?
A lot of this, when I talk about nutrition matching your cycle and your hormones, comes from Eastern medicine. And there's a blend sort of Ayurveda and, Ayurvedic medicine and Eastern Chinese medicine. So I'll just kind of frame it as like
Great.
Eastern medicine. And it matches with your basal body temperature. So there are foods that are actually toned, and you can Google this. Like, I did not invent this.
Mm,
This is not right. This has been around for thousands of years, and women in different cultures have done this. They eat differently to match with their hormones and shift and change things. So basal body temperature, we all know, period starts, basal body temperature drops and is lower for the first couple of weeks, right? So let's say days 1 through 14, that follicular phase. Lower basal body temperature. So you're going to actually match that with the tone of food that you're eating. Cooling foods, chicken, turkey, fish, any type of seafood is more cooling. Raw fruits and veggies are more cooling. Beverages that are room temperature or cooler. Now in Chinese medicine, they don't recommend you drink ice water. That's not good for your digestion. But just having it be not hot, hot, hot beverages. And then there's seasoning spices that are more cooling. Rosemary, thyme, mint, things like that. Um, Cilantro, for those that love cilantro. Those are very cooling toned foods. And leaning into that to lean into the lower basal body temperature time frame, that can help your system just match with what estrogen is doing at that time.
Mm.
Switch it over, you ovulate, and with ovulation comes that progesterone and increase in basal body temperature. And this is where a lot of women, they wonder, how do I get my progesterone up? How can I increase that? What are other things I can do besides just trying to take a supplement, to help boost progesterone? This is one of the things you can do on a daily basis to help with that progesterone is match your basal body temperature with the tone of your food, warming foods. And this actually is really helpful for this time frame because as what the body's doing, needing more calories, needing more nutrients, red meats, all the iron and rich, dense nutrients in that food is so helpful at the time. Cooking your fruits and vegetables at that time frame as well, your digestive system slows down. Progesterone does slow down your digestive system a bit. So when you cook the fruits and vegetables, you can digest and break down the fibrous components easier, allowing you to absorb even more nutrients from the food that you're eating. And then, of course, the spicy things, right? Like hot sauce, peppers, ginger, things like that, cinnamon, warming, seasonings. So this is an easy thing that you can do, right? Like, so I'm married, I've got 3 kids. I layer in and add in different things to my daily meals to shift it warming or cooling based on where I'm at in my cycle. And it doesn't disrupt the family or anything like that,
They
right?
probably don't even know.
No, right? Well, and sometimes my husband will be like, "Oh, we're gonna make tacos tonight." Am I making like he calls it hot tacos or cold tacos, right? Meaning like chicken tacos with cilantro for cooling, or is it like beef or venison and like adding a ton of hot sauce on there,
It's cool that your
salsa.
whole family has kind of adopted that, but I
Yeah,
love that you've looked back at the traditions of Ayurveda and TCM, and
yeah.
there's obviously a lot of other traditional medical cultural traditions. And what's so fascinating, what I researched, and I love Ayurveda too, and what I've noticed is that if you look across multiple distinctly developed, unique systems of medicine
Mhm.
with different cultures, there are such similarities that arise in like the way that cycles come into play. And I don't just mean menstrual cycles, like cycling with seasons, cycling with food, the even daily patterns. And there's just so many similarities that rise up, which is really interesting because it's like before the rise of like peer reviewed studies, we
Yes.
had the power of observation, and you
Yes.
had medical providers who had to observe their whole community and what worked and what didn't, and then
Mhm.
patterns emerge, and now we test them in a lab, which is great, but at that time, they couldn't, but for thousands of years, they
Yeah.
refined them, and I see it most with, like, TCM, a traditional Chinese medical like, the herbal system is amazing
Yes.
with how much they know and how effective
Mhm.
the herbs are
Yeah.
and how developed that body of information is. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Because it's been done, and it's a um, medicinal art that's been practiced for thousands of years on millions, if not billions of people. So all that collective data that's been come together, that's why it is what it is.
Yeah, I love that we're talking about
So,
this. So tell me a little bit about how you blend this with Dutch testing kind of in this modern day. Because now, and then maybe serum too, like if you're doing serum tests, because I know you're utilizing this kind of ancient body of knowledge and you're combining it with a more modern, conventional approach as well to
yes.
really fully understand a woman's picture.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I say this all the time. Like, I love Dutch testing. Like,
Thank you. We
I
love that
talk
you
about it
love
all the time. Like, this is you don't have to put this in the podcast at all.
it.
But I'm just saying,
We
I
absolutely
like
will, though.
there's right. I love Dutch testing so much. I talk about it all the time. And like there was I did a consult the other day and she was like, "Oh yeah, you're the Dutch lady." I was like, "I'm not really. Like I'm not sponsored by them at all." Like that's I just think it's such a valuable test in terms of all the knowledge you're going to get. And I even at one point, I don't know if you guys have done this, but I went through one time because someone was like, "Oh, it's an expensive test." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's actually really inexpensive for the amount of data that you get." I went through and added
It's
up. If you
true.
were going to order all these separately, it was over $1,200
Right.
of all this stuff. And I was like,
And
so
ease of collection. I mean, it's,
yes,
4
yes, and
samples.
ease of collection. I was
Mhm.
like, so this is really, in my opinion, a steal of a deal for all the stuff you're going to learn about your body and then what to do about it. So how I approach this, because there's a very, again, I'm coming at it from an Eastern medicine standpoint, and a functional medicine and like, I don't know, holistic, whatever, right? So getting the data from the Dutch test and understanding like this is your starting point, right? In the whole journey of your health. This is where you're at. Like I think like this is a roadmap that we're getting. So many women, and because I was there too, like struggling with cysts, struggling with all these things, taking a basket of supplements. I had a basket. It was like over 30 bottles I would take every day because I was trying so hard to figure out what was going on. And I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know my starting point, right? It doesn't help if you're lost in the woods and somebody gives you a map and you're like, oh, this is great. I have a map. I can get out of here. Well, if you're in the woods in like Oregon or something, it doesn't help if they give you a map to Central Park in New York. That's not the same, right?
Mhm.
So you get the roadmap for exactly where you're at to kind of lead you out of there and to say, okay, here's where you have dysfunction. Here's where you have deficiencies. Here, this needs to be supported. Your body's exhausted, or you're clearly not, you're not sleeping well. Yep, I can see that on here by your cortisol patterns. Your melatonin's terrible. And in order for your hormones to function well, we have to work on all of these areas. So it's the blend of saying, okay, here are things that work with Eastern medicine. Here's the great nutrient recommendations, all that other stuff, but applying it specifically to what we're seeing for you to say, let's lean into this. Oh, your progesterone is really low. Oh, you're not ovulating regularly. Oh, this is not going well. Let's really lean into that warming, right? The warming foods, all that other stuff. Let's apply seed cycling. Let's apply, specific supplemental recommendations or nutraceuticals for you that are going to help with that as well, and just attack it from all angles to help make that change. Yeah.
I love that because we haven't really talked about this before when we look at, how you can use it from kind of a different point of view, that TCM perspective. But it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I love that you're sharing that with us. Tell me a little bit about your favorite aspects of Dutch testing. Like obviously you're looking at menstrual hormones, but you've mentioned, cortisol pattern, melatonin, nutrient
Yeah.
deficiency. So I can tell you're looking at other parts as well.
Yeah. I think all of it matters. I really think all of it matters. I don't think that there's a single thing on there that is, it all like supports each other. It's all really important information. And I feel like there's a lot of women when they say, oh, my cycle's off, or I'm trying to get pregnant, or am I in perimenopause? I'm not really sure, what's going on. And they'll look at their, see like the roadmap of their estrogens, progesterones, and just focus on that. I'm like, yeah, but your adrenals are tanked. Like, we can't get those hormones back online if we don't support the adrenals too.
Yeah.
So having some of that information is so, so, so valuable. And then to also kind of give people a timeline to say, hey, you kind of thrashed your body, or to learn more about people and say, oh, you were going through a really nasty divorce for 4 years. That's wiped you out. Like, that's prevalent here. We can see
Mhm.
that, right?
Yeah.
So give your body some time and some grace coming back online.
So let's talk more about HPA axis because that's something that, is on the test. I know obviously it matters a lot to you. What are the typical like stress patterns that you're seeing show up
Oh
on
my
testing
gosh.
in women?
Mhm. So one of the I'm seeing like it's either one end of the spectrum or the other right now. That's kind of what I'm seeing. Either women's like their metabolized cortisol marker is on the floor, or it's off the charts. Just one or the other, right? It's insane. I'm like, what is going on with people? Where they're either their adrenals are totally overworked, or they're completely, you know.
So for those of you who are maybe newer to HPA axis testing, like this is a really important piece to understand. And Dr. Beth, I'm going to let you dive in more. But just to kind of lay the land, like most of the time we look, or providers, the first thing we learn is to look at the diurnal pattern. That's free cortisol. So that's looking at the, what happens in the morning. And then usually it's 4 time points throughout the day, maybe more. We also offer one with cortisol awakening response where you do 3 time points in the first hour. That gives you like a kind of a stress test for the day, but that's the free cortisol. Now, what Dr. Beth is talking about with metabolized cortisol is something that's unique with Dutch urine because we can actually measure the metabolites of cortisol and cortisone, which we look at both because cortisone, sometimes people interconvert it. But that actually gives us a better idea of how much is produced throughout the course of the day. And one thing
Mm.
that's super interesting is sometimes there's a mismatch where cortisol, your free cortisol looks really low, but you can look at the metabolites and it's like really clear that you're making and using and eliminating through urine a ton of cortisol. Or
Yeah.
other times it seems super high. You'd think, I need to lower their cortisol. But when you look at metabolites are really low. They're just not eliminating them. So it's a really, I'm glad we're talking about this because it's a really interesting addition to the understanding that we can
Yeah.
get. And it really should be the first thing we look at when we look at HPA axis function. So
Yeah.
go ahead,
Yeah.
go on. I'll let you
Yeah.
tell it.
No, absolutely. And this is one of the things with this process is that it's so important again to know your starting point because time and time again, I had it happen. I'm not kidding. 3 times this week alone, where someone's like, I'm taking this thing. I know I have bad cortisol, whatever the bad means. I don't feel good. I know I'm stressed. I'm taking this thing. And I'm like, okay, stop taking that. Like what you're taking is designed to increase your already high cortisol. Or what you're taking, your cortisol's on the floor. Like, and you're taking something that is not helping move it forward. So understanding what that is, and really understanding it, yeah, just to have the clarity. Like I went through one again, this was yesterday. There was a gal, I was like, okay, your waking cortisol level, right? On her free cortisol and free cortisone, the patterns, the waking level was over twice wherever the range is, right? It was like, boop, way up there,
Mm.
way up there. And I was like, so it looks like you're waking in kind of like a panic attack. She goes, oh my God, yes. I was like, so your body's doing that. It wakes up and immediately thinks, I need to fight a bear. There's a bear here. I got to fight, right? And she's like, I thought I was going crazy to wake up like that. I was like, you're not crazy. It's right here. Numbers don't lie. It's in black and white on the page. Your system wakes really stressed. So she's like, well, why? I was like, I don't know. What are you doing in your sleep? No, but that's your starting point to be able to work on it then
Mhm.
and to move forward from there. So you don't continue to feel like that. And then again, to say, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. Like, nope, you're not crazy.
Absolutely.
This
We
is,
see that a lot too
yeah,
when people have elevated blood sugar through the night, like when there's
yeah,
blood sugar dysregulation. If you see that on your Dutch test, that morning waking cortisol, not in the normal range, but actually quite high, that's a real sign to us that there could be some metabolic stuff going on.
yeah,
Because that will cause, or if you wake up, that the other thing is sometimes people like wake up and have insomnia and then you're not really catching a normal morning cortisol. Those are the other things. But you're right, it can feel so panicky. You wake up like on 100% on. You
yeah.
don't want to be waking up at 100 or at 0,
Yes.
where it takes you 2 hours to kind of boot up your system.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I use my like analogy is the three bears, right? You don't want to be like too much like the papa bear, right? You don't want to be the mama bear where it's too low. You want to be in the baby bear just right, just in the
There you
middle.
go. That's
Yeah.
right. And tell me a little bit about, because we started the podcast by talking a little bit about weight loss for women. Do you
Yeah.
find that cortisol or HPA axis dysfunction plays a role in that for women?
Huge, huge
Okay.
role. Huge role. I had someone, oh my gosh, she was so funny. I worked with this gal for over a year. Um, and this is one of my favorite stories. If she listens to this, she's gonna be like, I knew you were talking about me. Because she's such a firecracker. Um, she had a lot of issues like, hot flashes, gut issues, all this stuff, nutrient deficiencies. We went through and worked on a ton of stuff for over 6 months. And then she was like, okay, I am feeling so much better. I am feeling so like this is amazing. And I was like, fantastic. She goes, but I haven't lost weight. She's like 2 pounds, 3 pounds. What the heck? I'm doing everything. I'm eating super clean. I'm exercising. I'm doing all the stuff. I know I'm sleeping now. That's changed. Why hasn't the weight just fallen off? She's like, I would expect to be 20 pounds lighter based on how I feel. I feel so
Mhm.
good. I was like, okay, well, let's retest, see what's going on. It was incredible. All of her markers were beautiful on her Dutch, her updated Dutch, except for her cortisol was still elevated, right? Across the board, everything. And I was like, you're just still really stressed. I was like, so you have to take it down. So we talked about, okay, here's some different things. I was like, meditation, deep breathing techniques, all these things. I didn't tell her to take a single thing. I was like, you have to calm your nervous system down. And I said, for 30 days, I said, let's check back in 30 days and then we'll talk again.
And how did she
Hilarious,
do?
because she was like, fine, fine. And I got on the phone with her 30 days later and she was like, I'm so mad at you. And I was like, what? Oh my God, what? She's like, I did it every day, every single day for 30 days because I was like, I'm going to prove her wrong. This is not it. Doing deep breathing isn't going to do poop for me. And this is ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. So she's like, every day I'd get up and I would do deep breathing. And then at night I would meditate for 30 minutes, blah, 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 blah. And she goes, I've lost over 5 pounds. I haven't done a single thing different. My eating, exercising, supplements, everything else is exactly the same. I
Wow.
still feel really good. The only thing she changed was really targeting the stress, which again, we knew to target from her updated Dutch. And she's like, this is stupid. I was like, is it stupid or is it great that you figured it out and targeted it?
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, it's something that I think that we can't overestimate,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the role that stress plays in hormonal function and metabolic function. I recommend this book all the time. There's a great book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Richard Sapolsky that, I mean, it's
Yes.
like I read it in med school. So, I mean, it's like probably 20 years old, but I still read it. I have it on my bedside. Actually, my 5-year-old was like, what's this book about with the zebras? Why are you reading about zebras? Um, that's just last week because I still pick it up and
Yeah.
remind myself of the physiology behind stress because I never want to forget how
Yeah.
impactful it can be.
Yeah, yeah, and I think this is because I work with women, so I think for women to really understand, like, that stress response, that whole thing, like, I love Dutch because of the picture, the stress that and the arrows down to the brain,
Oh, the
right?
picture we have on the
The
HPX
on page
report.
5, yeah, like, page 5, that's my favorite page. I don't know if people should have a favorite page, but that's my favorite page because of the picture and what it shows, and I'm like, the thing about the stress there is that your thoughts can trigger it. Past, present, or future. So if you are stuck in a past event and maybe you need to work on that and do therapy and all that stuff, at the same time that we're working on your body's physiological response, yes, that tandem work, that's going to be helpful. Future stress, if you constantly worry about stuff, right? I chatted, this was just a few weeks ago, I chatted with a gal, and one of the things that we were really diving into was she's like, I constantly feel on edge. And she's like, I think this is why I'm stressed all the time. I was like, why? She's like, my life is great. I have no reason to feel like this, but I constantly feel like, and when I'm driving to work, I imagine that something goes wrong and I have to have fights with people. So I have imaginary fights with people in my head driving to work. I'm going to my kid's basketball game. I'm imagining fighting with the ref. I'm having this internal conflict. And I was like, wow. I was like, your body is responding to that thought process. That's keeping going, right? So the magical thing about humans is that we will have that reaction just with our thoughts. Isn't that
Yeah,
crazy?
it is crazy, and that's the power of, like, mind-body medicine, really, because
Mhm.
truly, you're totally right, and research has shown this. This is not, like, woo-woo, even though it sounds like it, but they've shown this, that people can have the same negative experiences, and the way that they tell that story to themselves impacts physiology differently in
Yeah.
those 2 people. So, it's a really important point to bring up because, you know, you can experience good things, bad things, but the way that you describe that to yourself, the way that you live that story dramatically impacts whether and what the power in that is that you can change that, right?
Yes.
And that's training is available to change your mindset. Anyone can change and improve their mindset, and that's so reassuring.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why it's so valuable to get a Dutch test. I sorry, I keep looking over here because I keep all my props here when when I talk about it.
Here it
Um
is. Here's a Dutch test.
Yeah, that's why I think it's so valuable because otherwise, you spend so much time, energy, money on things that they're not bad. They're just not leading you in the direction you need to go in because you don't know what that is. You don't have that roadmap.
Yeah.
So to see it there laid out, that gives you that biofeedback to say, oh, well, why is my system like that? Let me reflect. Oh my gosh, I have internal fights with people all day long. I'm ready. I show up somewhere ready to fight.
Mm,
And she's like, 99% of the time, nothing happens. I don't fight with anybody, but I'm ready to. I was like, whoa, okay. Let's work
yeah.
on changing that and bringing that down.
I
Yeah.
talk about that with my husband all the time. He has like a military background. He was in Britain,
Oh,
but I view the world as like a very safe place, and he views the
yeah.
world like assessing risk, because that's kind of how his
Yeah.
brain was trained when he was very young, was to like go into a space like every restaurant. Like I know he knows the exits, and he knows like what people look suspicious and what he should keep an eye on, and he sits in the place where he can kind of get a better seat of the restaurant to like maintain everybody's safety. He's
Yeah.
basically like a sheepdog on alert at all times. And I'm like that person, there's great videos online of like a husband and a wife at the airport, and the husband's like scanning the room, looking around, and the wife is like pushing her suitcase, drinking her Starbucks,
Yeah.
in La La Land. And that's completely the two of us. But I do think about the impact that has on his health for being on alert like that. And, thank
Mhm.
goodness we have people like that, right? That's a huge part of our community to keep us safe.
Yeah.
But I do think sometimes about HPA axis stimulation,
Yeah.
around that.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears a little bit, because there's one element that we haven't talked about that you talk a lot about in your work, which is nutrient depletion. And I want to make sure we cover this a little bit, because I feel like this is even more pertinent right now in the weight loss community, because with GLP-1 or agonists out there and
Yeah.
others, what we're seeing is that people are really decreasing the caloric intake on
Yeah.
these medications. And one of the big risks that's been seen is like reduction in bone loss, reduction in muscle mass, which can then lead to kind of a rebound of weight if you ever go off of it. But nutritional
Yeah.
depletion has been a worry for a longer time than that, but I just think it's like under a microscope right now, and where it's probably a great thing that we're talking about it. But I want to get your point of view on that. Like, what's going on with us with nutrient depletion? Obviously, we have a decrease in quality of our food.
Yeah.
We also have, people that are dieting. How can we help women prevent missing out on the nutrients that are so critical for their health and their menstrual balance and their hormone balance? Because I think there is kind of a give and take there.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. This is a whole like weekend seminar. I feel like
I know.
you
But
just
can you please cover it in like 2 minutes
yeah.
or less? No, I'm just
Yes,
kidding.
nutrient depletion is bad.
Yeah.
Get your vitamins. No, the food that we're eating just doesn't have as many nutrients as it used to have. And with the processed foods, everything else, we oftentimes forget that it's not just what you eat, it's what you absorb. So your gut health and everything else plays a huge role, which I also love that there is that, gut
An
health
indigo
marker
marker.
on the Dutch test.
I love that too.
Oh my God, I love it. I absolutely love it because sometimes people are like, oh, I don't know, my gut's always bloated. That's normal for me. I'm like, it's not normal. It's not normal. You are bad balance, good to bad bacteria here. We got to target that too. Because again, you can be this was 2 days ago. There was a report. She was deficient B12s, both B6s, glutathione, all this stuff. She's like, how? I was like, your gut sucks. Here, I didn't say sucks. I was like, your gut's not functioning well. But so you can be eating all the stuff, but you're not absorbing it. So it is so important that you get those nutrients in, that your digestive system works well. And there are so many things out there dietary wise that disrupt your gut. The new things that are out on the market, the things that people used to do, laxatives, all that stuff, that doesn't help your absorption rate either. Um, to move that through, that contributes to that nutrient deficiency. And then especially for women, because our nutrient needs change throughout the month
Mhm.
and our bodies really, really respond to that, where it can mess up then your production and maintenance of estrogens, progesterones, your hormone levels overall. And it can really create issues with regular ovulation. Now, the amazing thing about the human body, because I don't want this to be like doom and gloom, like, oh, if you did this before, you ruined your body, da 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 da. The human body has an amazing ability to heal, to come around, as long as it's given the opportunity. So again, once we know what that is, looking at things, looking at your markers, and setting that path back, your body can do amazing things. But this reminds me of a gal. This was several years ago. She had done bodybuilding competitions, so for like 8 years. So had restricted calories, lost her period. Right, this was normal in her world. And then she got married, and she was like, "Oh, I'll just start eating more, and that's going to help my calories, and I'm going to start getting my period again." She didn't get a period back. 3 years later, right? She's eating more calories. She's still active. She's not working out like she was. still didn't have a natural period unless she went in and like she's like, yeah, they'd give me a medication and then I'd bleed, but I wouldn't ever have a normal period.
Right.
And it wasn't until we looked at her report and everything else, I was like, you are still really depleted. We got to pick these levels up and really nourish your body. And it wasn't about just eating more, right? It wasn't about just gaining some weight back from when she did these bikini shows. It was about getting those specific nutrients in that support hormone production and maintenance. So it made a huge difference. And now she actually just had her second baby.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, because that was her big thing.
Great.
She's like, I got married, I want to have a family, and I can't. She's like, I haven't had a period in over a decade. What do I
Wow.
do? Yeah.
That's amazing. And we hear those stories and they're so reassuring because you're right. We can heal. And that's, a great
Mhm.
reassurance. If you're listening and you feel like you're on the wrong track or you feel like you've tried everything and haven't had the success, there is a path to success. You know what I mean? It takes consistency, it takes support, it
Yeah.
takes unlocking the root cause, but absolutely, there's so many options out there. So, I mean, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with
Yeah.
us today and your Dutch love. We always I personally love so much because the same thing, like I work at Dutch because I love the test and I was a practitioner before and realized the impact it had on my practice and on my patients at a fertility practice. And it's exciting for me to get the chance to connect with other providers like you who are finding the same help,
Yeah.
for uncovering what's going on and being able to help their patients
Yeah.
successfully. So,
Yay.
thanks, Dr. Westie. Really appreciate you being here with me today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I love it. Like I said, I love Dutch. I love talking about it. I love educating on it. I love sharing it with other providers because it is so valuable to have. And once you understand how to read the test and know what's on there, like you'll never go back to anything else, right? Like a blood test just isn't comparable. So,
I think we can end right there. Thanks
yeah.
so much. If you're wanting to learn and really expand your expertise in hormones, you're not going to want to miss our podcast. So make sure you tune in each and every week for our new content.